Good evening, everybody. Let's start with our motivation. And ask ourselves, why are we sitting here to listen, to talk about the 7 types of cognizers? And to recall that the Buddha talked about a 3-tiered way of improving our mind. First through learning, listening to teachings, reading them. Second, through thinking about them, reflecting on them, contemplating on them, making sure we understand them correctly. And third, by meditating on them with deep concentration in order to integrate the meaning in our mind stream, into our very being. So we have to begin with learning. Otherwise, we don't have anything to think about. And if we can't reflect or think about anything to gain a correct conceptual understanding, then meditation is also going to be difficult because we're missing the content. So this evening we're engaging in learning so we can take the teachings away and reflect on them and then meditate on them in order to realize them. And to do this not solely for our own benefit, but really feeling that we're dependent on the kindness of other living beings, doing it for their benefit, and not just for their benefit, but in order to attain the fully awakened state of a Buddha, so that we'll have all the compassion and wisdom, skill and power necessary to be of the greatest benefit. So that's our ultimate goal, and we're generating that motivation, renewing that motivation to go in that direction. And what we do tonight is one step in that direction. So this 3-step approach of hearing, reflecting, and meditating, the Buddha taught in both the Pali and the Sanskrit scriptures. And it's really something to think about. Why did he teach this 3-step process? Why not just go to meditation? Yeah? Cross your legs, close your eyes, watch your thoughts. Why not just do that? Or watch your breath? Why do we need all these teachings and thinking about things and discussing them? And it's because we have to have a correct conceptual idea of the path and the direction we're going in. Without that, then our own conceptual mind makes up its own path and its own objects to meditate on. Yeah? So we sit down and we hear selflessness, and then got to meditate on selflessness, got to meditate on emptiness. We haven't heard teachings, so, we make up our own meanings of those words and meditate on what we think they mean, without realizing that, this is all our fabrication, because all we have is the word that we heard somewhere along the line. And so in this way we really get ourselves tied up in knots and can get stuck and go in all sorts of wrong directions. Yeah? So it's important to learn. Yeah? I mean, why do we have a teacher? So we can learn. Now, why did the Buddha appear on this earth? So he could teach, so we could learn. If it wasn't important to hear teachings and learn teachings and thinking about them, if we could do it all on our own by just sitting and meditating according to what we thought meditation was, then there would have been no reason for the Buddha to appear on the earth, and no reason for him to have taught all these sutras for 45 years. Because we could have sat down and just gotten it ourselves. Yeah? But the Buddha, out of his incredible compassion and kindness, spent a long time teaching. And he taught topics not just one time, many times. When you look in the Pali Canon, there's whole sections of sutras where it's at Sravasti, he said da, 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 da. And then it's the exact same sutra, except it's at Rajgir, he said da, da, da. Yeah. Or he said such and such to one person, and then the next sutra is he said the exact same thing to another person. I mean, I don't think the Buddha really, all his discourses were totally 100% word by word repeated in one place and then another, or to one person and another. But it's the whole idea that, he taught things many times. And I'm sure that in the audience, there were people who heard these many times. Yeah. So that whole process of learning, from somebody who knows, from the Buddha, is really, integral to our own progress. Yeah. It's not the path we make up. Because we've been making up paths to happiness since beginningless time, and we're still not out of samsara. So maybe that's telling us something about the quality of the paths that we made up to happiness, but they've just resulted in more samsara. So it is really important for us to learn the teachings, and then not just learn them and parrot them back, but to really think about them. Do they make sense? Yeah, so that if somebody asks us a question, or if a doubt comes up in our own mind, we can respond to that question or resolve that doubt. Yeah. Because certainly when we sit down to meditate, all sorts of things come up, and, doubts and so on. And so we have to really have thought about the teachings well. Otherwise our doubts just take over when we sit down to meditate. Okay? So we do this 3-step process. And then, of course, concentration is needed for meditation. Meditation's not just crossing our legs. We have a hard enough time crossing our legs and sitting still. But to get our mind to concentrate, that's a whole other ballgame. So there's lots of different things that we need to work on, lots of different qualities we need to develop on this path. It's not just one quality or one insight or one practice. There's so many. His Holiness keeps saying that our mind is a very complicated thing. So there's so many different things we need to cultivate and learn about to deal with all these different aspects of ourselves and of our minds. So this topic that we've been talking about, where today might be the last in the series of it. So many of you are coming, some of you are coming, well, at the end, but that's okay. Whatever you take away is beneficial. So it's about the 7 types of cognizers. So we've been talking about, how our mind cognizes objects. What kind of minds are there? Yeah. And so we talked about reliable cognizers, that are incontrovertible, that fully understand something so that the understanding can't be shaken. And among those we talked about direct perceivers, sense direct perceivers, mental direct perceivers, apperception, and yogic direct perceivers. We talked about inferential cognizers, and then we talked about subsequent cognizers. So, after you first realize something, the consciousness that realizes the object after that, what's going on there. We talked about correct assumption, where we have the correct conclusion, but we don't have the reason for the correct conclusion down very well. Or maybe we don't even have any reason, except it seems right. And then we talked about doubt. We talked about inattentive. Inattentive, good. Yes, inattentive awareness is where we aren't paying attention, so we can't remember what we cognized, and then doubt, and then today we're on wrong consciousnesses. Okay? So there's an order to this, Are you getting some sense of the order of these different cognizers? Yeah? And so we're finally getting to wrong consciousnesses. And then the idea is when we actually are developing an understanding of selflessness or emptiness, then our mind presently is at a wrong consciousness. And then we go through improving the quality of the cognizer of selflessness or emptiness until we get to a yogic direct perceiver, a reliable consciousness. Okay, so let's talk about wrong consciousnesses. So none of us like to be wrong, and we will fight to be right, to prove to everybody we are right. But the fact of the matter is we are wrong an awful lot. And we have to get used to being wrong, or get used to knowing that we're wrong, so that we can change it. Yeah. In the Dharma, insisting we're right doesn't work very well, because we're only fooling ourselves. Okay. So a wrong consciousness, let's start with the definition. A knower which is erroneous or mistaken with regard to its engaged object is the definition of a wrong consciousness. Okay? So a cognizer which engages in its object in an erroneous manner. So it doesn't realize the object the way the object in fact exists, and it cognizes something else instead. So to know what is a wrong consciousness, we actually have to know how something actually exists. Yeah, so lots of times we have wrong consciousnesses, but because we don't know how things actually exist, we don't realize that a certain mental state is a wrong consciousness. Yeah, and we think it's a right consciousness. And even if somebody comes and tries to talk to us about, well, things don't exactly exist that way, and it's not really like that, and all, we put on defensive mode because we don't like to be wrong, we like to be right. And we don't realize we're wrong, so we defend ourselves because our reputation is at stake. And our self-esteem is at stake. And I'm going to be right, and this is a right cognizer, and just get away from here. You don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah? It's quite interesting, isn't it? We're wrong, and then we get even wronger defending our wrongness. Because all those consciousnesses that are defending our wrong understanding are also wrong cognizers. Because their anger and defensiveness and arrogance, and all those are wrong cognizers, not seeing the object the way things actually are. So it's quite interesting, we just kind of get on the bandwagon of wrong consciousnesses and take off, thinking that we're right the whole way along. Hmm? This is what they call ignorance. There's a reason Buddha said ignorance was at the root of it, Okay, so there's different kinds of classifications of wrong consciousnesses. So there's conceptual wrong consciousnesses and non-conceptual wrong consciousnesses. Okay, so conceptual wrong consciousnesses, let's see if we have a definition here. No, they just gave illustrations. So an illustration of a conceptual wrong consciousness is a thought consciousness apprehending the horns of a rabbit, and a thought consciousness apprehending a self of persons. Okay, so or a conceiver, a conceptual consciousness apprehending permanent sound. Yeah, or apprehending things that are by nature dukkha as happiness. Yeah, apprehending things that are impermanent as permanent. Things that are by nature foul as beautiful. Things that lack a self as having a self. All of these are conceptual wrong consciousnesses. Okay. Now, many of these are innate. We usually think of conceptual things as things that we've learned, but conceptual can also be much more subtle than our mind that's chattering with words. Yeah. So especially, the ignorance that's grasping at a self of persons or a self of phenomena, these are innate consciousnesses that came from previous lives, but they're all conceptual. And even animals have them. Yeah. So you don't have to know language to have that kind of concept. Language can reify it in some ways, but language can also help us take it apart and disassemble it. Okay, so remember, a conceptual mind is a mental consciousness that sees things through the filter or by means of a conceptual appearance. So it's different than a direct perceiver, like our 5 sense consciousnesses that will know things directly. It is, a thought consciousness, and there's this conceptual appearance that is like a generality of what the object is. Okay, so there's a big difference between hearing the sound and then remembering the sound. Okay, there's a difference, isn't there? Yeah, or look at the green of the tablecloth, yeah, and then close your eyes and remember the green. So there's a difference, because when the conceptual mind is working, that conceptual mental consciousness, yeah, there's not a direct perception of the object. Yeah, we're taking different characteristics of the object and we're getting this general conceptual appearance. Okay, so, you know, if you happen to be thinking about horns of a rabbit, yeah, that's a wrong consciousness. If you're thinking about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that's also a wrong consciousness. Wrong consciousnesses are very powerful, you know, and defending wrong consciousnesses can bring so much suffering. I mean, our country went into a whole war due to some people's wrong consciousness, thinking there's weapons of mass destruction where there aren't any. Yeah?
The explanation you just gave, isn't everything a wrong consciousness?
No.
You know, you point to the color green and say it's direct. I have a direct perception of the color green, but my mind is saying green actually exists when it doesn't.
Yeah. So that part of it, green doesn't exist in the way, green exists, but not in the way that you're perceiving it.
Exactly.
Okay? So in that way, that's when we're talking about grasping at true existence or grasping at inherent existence, that mind that is grasping the green to exist as some kind of external object with its own nature, that is a wrong consciousness.
Doesn't that make just about everything, unless I'm sitting in meditative equipoise?
Well,
I have realized emptiness?
no, there's a difference between inherent existence appearing and us grasping at it.
Which is?
Okay, which is everything for sentient beings, every consciousness except meditative equipoise on that's directly perceiving emptiness is a mistaken consciousness, not necessarily wrong, but mistaken in that the things are appearing to it to inherently exist. Because everything we look at, it looks like it's out there, doesn't it? You know, everything's out there. It has its own nature. And that just is the way things appear to us. Okay, so all our consciousnesses are mistaken in that the way things appear are not the way they exist. But not all of our consciousnesses assent to that appearance and hold it, grasp it to be true. Okay? So it's the ones that are grasping that wrong appearance as true that are the wrong consciousnesses. So for example, you know, we talk about the wrong conception of ourselves, of the person. So when you're just sitting here thinking I, you know, the I is appearing to be some kind of objective entity. But that's kind of it, you know. We're not really, you know, you're sitting here doing something, you're not really thinking I very much, and you're not, there's no big emotion going on, and yeah. But, so there's the appearance of the I, the self, as being truly existent, but we're not grasping at it. The grasping comes when somebody looks and says, "You are a jerk." And then you go, "Me?" And then the way the I is being apprehended at that moment is quite different, isn't it? Isn't the feeling of I different when you're just, you know, sitting there reading a book very calmly versus, you know, when you're agitated because somebody called you a name or, you know, is criticizing you. So the second one is the grasping at the true existence. That one's the wrong consciousness. Okay? So whenever there's anger or attachment, resentment, rebelliousness, conceit, dissimulation, pretension, all these kinds of disturbing mental states, they all arise on the basis of that self-grasping ignorance. Yeah? But we're not grasping the self as truly existent or inherently existent every single moment. Yeah?
But when you put the weapons of mass destruction through that scrutiny, there isn't even the appearance of weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
It's a mistaken appearance.
Yeah, right.
So how do we use that as an example?
Okay, because what I just explained was according to Prasangika. This text is according to Satantrika. So Satantrika isn't talking about the appearance of true existence and so on. Yeah. But even according to Prasangika, there's no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Doesn't matter whether they're inherently existent or not, there's none. Okay?
We're still grasping at the conceptual appearance of them, right?
Yeah, but what's wrong? We're grasping at something that doesn't exist as existing.
Right.
Yeah. So, there's no rabbit's horns. There's no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There's no Obama birth certificate in another country. Yeah.
And there's no inherently existence.
Yeah, and there's no inherent existence. Okay? So, but you can see, a lot of our discussions are about trying to discern what are wrong consciousnesses and what aren't. Like this whole debate over preventing violence by gun laws. We're trying to debate, some people have wrong consciousnesses about that, and we're right. If you talk about, let's say, banning assault weapons, okay, is that going to help stop gun violence? Forget the Second Amendment for the moment, okay? Is that something that's going to help prevent gun violence?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Okay? Now, there's some people who think it's not.
All we can do is look at other countries.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I know. But you have the guy who's the vice president of the NRA who said the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is to have a good guy with a gun. Now that doesn't make any sense in a packed movie theater with somebody shooting an assault weapon. You can have lots of good guys with guns and you're still going to wind up with many more people killed. Okay? But so what I'm getting at is like a lot of our discourse in society is trying to figure out what is a wrong conception and what isn't. Yeah? And people can get very attached to their wrong conceptions. Yeah? So it's not only the people who disagree with us politically, but we can get very attached to our wrong conceptions too. Yeah?
There are two questions from online.
Uh-huh.
First is, does it flow from the argument that grasping is that which causes the most suffering? And if we are not grasping, however, we are still suffering from pervasive suffering.
We are still what?
We're still suffering from all pervasive suffering.
Yeah.
That's the third kind.
Okay, so we say that the grasping at true existence is the root of suffering. Okay? It doesn't mean that, or the root of dukkha, the root of samsara. Yeah? It doesn't mean that you're having the ouch kind of suffering every time your mind is... This is why I don't like translating dukkha as suffering. It's very misleading. Yeah? So you can have grasping at true existence and be experiencing happiness. The second kind of happiness, the changeable happiness. But there's always the dukkha of pervasive conditioning. And the self-grasping ignorance is the root of that. I hope that answers that person's question. And the
The
second?
second one is, can we really talk about right or wrong consciousnesses with respect to predictions about the future?
Okay, so can we talk about right or wrong consciousnesses with respect to predictions about the future? We talked about that last week when we were talking about intuition. You know, that when you have predictions about the future, the only way you can validate whether it was a reliable consciousness or not is after it happens. Yeah? Only after it happens.
Honorable checking. Dukkha of pervasive conditioning. How would you translate dukkha there?
I just leave it as dukkha. Or if I have to translate it, I would say the unsatisfaction or unsatisfactory circumstance. There's not a good English word.
Unsatisfactory nature of anything conditioned?
Yeah. It has to do something with unsatisfactory. You have to have that word in there somewhere. There's not a unsatisfactoriness. Yeah, is a strange word.
Unstable nature of all conditioned things?
No, not just unstable, you know, but really unsatisfactory in all the different ways. Yeah. Unstable, I would associate more with things being impermanent, you know, functioning things being impermanent. But I think dukkha is even deeper. I think pervasive condition, the dukkha of pervasive conditioning is even deeper than functioning things being impermanent. Yeah.
That's more the impermanence is more the cause of the second dukkha.
Yeah.
The happiness changes.
Yeah, the happiness changes into actual suffering. But also, you know, things that are unattractive by nature being seen as attractive. Things without a self being seen as a self. Yeah, so all of that is included in, you know, in the cause of the third kind of dukkha. Shall we go on?
Well, if I can just, this point always sticks for me too. Is like the moment, the difference between when you have this mistaken consciousness that just has the appearance of true existence and then it becomes grasping, and not knowing when it's changed.
Yeah. That's because our mindfulness is not so sharp. Yeah. I mean, that's what we really have to cultivate, is mindfulness and you know, clear knowing or introspective awareness.
So that's
You
like
know.
being able to recognize the malefactors when they rise.
Yeah. Yeah.
For grasping, are you speaking of upadana?
That's one kind of grasping. I mean, it's not just the upadana that's in the 12 links. Yeah, but it's referring, when we're talking about the grasping at true existence or inherent existence, it means grasping at a mode of existence that we think persons and phenomena have that they don't actually have. And that mode of existence is that they have some kind of intrinsic nature that makes them what they are without depending on causes and conditions, without depending on parts, without depending on the situation that they're in. They are that thing with that nature, and especially without depending on a mind which conceives and gives them a term, gives them a name. Yeah. So all of that is considered, you know, things appearing as objectively out there without any relationship, especially to the mind. Yeah. Okay. It has some nature from its own side. And this is the way things appear to us normally. Yeah? And when we hear something about, well, they don't actually exist this way, it kind of takes us a while to figure out what they're talking about. But it's really hard to discern, like you said, the difference between when there's just that appearance and when we're grasping at it, because we're so, everything from beginningless time has been appearing to us as, external, objective, out there. Or even when we think of the self, even though the self is internal, it's still some objective entity with its own nature, independent of everything else. And that's how we conceive of ourselves. Yeah? And we're not even aware that that's how we're grasping ourselves to exist, because we've always done it. That's why I'd like to use the example of, like, if you were born with sunglasses on, you never have known other than dark appearances, so you don't even recognize what you're seeing as dark. So it's kind of like that. Okay, so there's the conceptual wrong consciousnesses that are, we can see that those ones are really serious, because within them are all the different wrong views. Yeah? The whole myriad bunch of wrong views that we have.
So this grasping in the 12-fold chain of dependent origination is really the section about ignorance, sankhara, the fabrication, making namarupa, the appearance of namarupa, of name and form.
In the grasping, or I have started translating upadana there as clinging.
Right, but it's a different process. That's like craving, feeding on sensory experience.
But there's different kinds of upadana. Yeah, and one of them is grasping at a self, and one of them is grasping at sensory experiences. And then one is grasping at views, and then there's another one too. Yeah? But this one that's grasping at a self doesn't just mean a self like a person, but also self means inherent existence, which is how we think external things, different objects exist as well. So at the time of death, that kind of grasping is functioning. But in particular, that ninth link, the way the Sanskrit tradition speaks of it, is grasping for another set of aggregates. Yeah, it's like there's separation from this set of aggregates and another one.
One candle to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think we've been doing this since beginningless time. It's really sad, isn't it? Just in our ignorance.
And we're going to do it again.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
I practiced.
Okay, so then non-conceptual wrong consciousnesses. So there's two subdivisions of these. One is mental consciousnesses and one is sense consciousnesses. Let's do the sense ones. They're somewhat easier. Okay, so a sense wrong consciousness, for example, when your eye looks at a white snow mountain and it looks blue. Okay. When you're looking at the scarecrow and you think it's a person, or when you're looking at the person and you think it's a scarecrow. Okay, so here they talk about four adventitious causes of error. So 4 kinds of causes of temporary error for our sense consciousnesses. So the first one is the cause of the error exists in the object. So here an example would be when you're remember when we were kids and we had sparklers, and you take a sparkler and you turn it and it looks like there's a little ring of fire. So that's an example of the cause of error being in the object, because there's not a ring of fire. It's just, what we're doing with the object. Or an example of you're flying a prop jet and you can't see the propellers. Yeah, so that's an example of, that would be an example of a wrong consciousness, with the cause of error being with the object. Okay? Second of a wrong sense consciousnesses is depending on the basis. Okay? So here it has to do with a defect in the dominant condition, with the sense power. So, for example, going like this and you see two moons, or you see two of, whatever. Or actually, my glasses is better. When you put your glasses on a certain way, you can see two things. Yeah, I can't do it with my eye to get, but glasses I can. Okay, so, but. Actually, they would be different, because the one with the eye is the fault in the
Sense power itself.
and the power.
Maybe it's the seeing the hairs. Cataract.
Seeing the vitreous floaters. Yeah.
But I don't agree with that, because there is something there. It's not like you're...
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, there is matter there that you're seeing.
Yeah.
But it's looking like hair.
Okay.
That's the problem. Yeah. It's not looking like vitreous floaters. It's looking like hair. Don't you know what a vitreous floater looks like? Okay, the third kind of adventitious cause of error is in the place or the abode. So, for example, when you're riding in a vehicle and it looks like, the trees are moving. Yeah, so that again is a wrong consciousness. Yeah, or
When you're sitting in a car and the car next to you moves, but you think you've moved.
right, yeah. Or sometimes you're staying still and you think you've moved, but somebody else next to you have moved. Yeah. Okay, and then another one is a fault in the immediate preceding condition. So, for example, when you see red, when you're angry. Yeah, so that the sense perception is affected by the mental consciousness. Do people really see red? It says it here. Anybody see?
I've never heard anyone see it either.
Huh? Yeah?
I've heard the term, but I thought it was just a figure of speech.
Yeah.
I wonder if it just means that the red stands out more when the mind is gravitating.
Oh, that might be too. Yeah, that the red stands out more.
Like the bull.
Yeah.
Imagine the bull that wants to attack.
Or it could be, something that has affected your mind, and so your sense consciousness doesn't see things accurately.
There can also be the perception, if your heart beats more rapidly, your blood pressure increases, the veins start to dilate, and the pressure of the blood becomes so much stronger. I think that can even affect the eyes.
Yeah.
Or the sense of the heart and the blood becoming inflamed can be there.
Yeah. Yeah. So we should check next time we get angry. See? If we're seeing some kind of red color or whatever. Anyway. Okay. So we can see that there's lots of different kinds of wrong appearances. When we look in the distance and we think there's water on the road and it's a mirage. Yeah. Or we look in the mirror and we think there's a real person in there and it's just a reflection. So, these are all kind of wrong sense consciousnesses. Okay, then the wrong mental consciousness. So here they use the dream as an example of a wrong mental consciousness. Okay, so let's say a dream consciousness to which the blue, of you're dreaming about blue, clearly appears as blue. So this is a mental consciousness because it's a dream consciousness. So when we're dreaming, only the mental consciousness is functioning. The sense consciousnesses are shut down during dream. So even if you dream that you're hearing something, the ear power is not hearing. This is entirely the mental consciousness. Okay? It's also non-conceptual because it's a consciousness free from apprehending the sound and meaning as suitable to be mixed.
Hello?
Okay, so it's a consciousness that's free of apprehending the sound and meaning as suitable to be mixed. What this means is very good. Okay, so what this means is, we've been talking before about conceptual appearances or meaning generalities and then sound generalities. So when you hear, let's say, somebody says to you, lamp, but you don't know what a lamp is, but just through hearing the word lamp, you get maybe some image that appears to you. Or even somebody describes to you what a lamp is, you get some image. Yeah. Or let's use the example of Bodh Gaya. Okay, you've never been to Bodh Gaya. Somebody says Bodh Gaya, you get some idea from the word. And maybe somebody talks to you about Bodh Gaya, and there's this big stupa, and then, there's the pond behind it, and then the shops are over here, and and so through a verbal explanation, you get some idea of what Bodh Gaya looks like. Okay? So that would be like the sound generality. Yeah, something from a sound. The meaning generality would be you go to Bodh Gaya and then afterwards you remember what it looks like. Okay? Thinking, the mind that sees the sound generality and meaning generality as suitable to be mixed is the mind that knows when you say the word Bodh Gaya, or you describe a certain place, it's referring to that object that you saw. Okay, so what it means, when they talk about sound generality and meaning generality suitable to be mixed, it means that you're able to identify objects by knowing the words that know them. Okay? So this is just why it's trying to show why a dream consciousness is a mistaken or wrong mental consciousness. Okay, so it's a mental consciousness because it's the senses aren't working. It's non-conceptual because there's no conceptual appearance. The dream, when we're dreaming, they say it's actually a direct perceiver.
The mental consciousness.
Yeah, it's a direct perceiver. However, it's a wrong direct perceiver because when you're dreaming, you think what you're dreaming about is real. So the dream object that is appearing real to you actually doesn't exist in the way it appears. So the dream is a wrong mental consciousness.
And when you
non-conceptual.
Within the dream?
Pardon?
When you realize you're dreaming?
In the dream.
Yeah, when you realize you're dreaming, okay, it's still a mental consciousness, it's still non-conceptual. It is I would say, it's still wrong in the sense that the dream things are still appearing to you to be real, but you're not buying into that appearance. Let me see if it says anything here about that.
That would be not grasping after them as inherently existent.
Yeah, that's the analogy that they use a lot. Yeah. Okay. Well, he says here, is dream blue blue? Is a dream elephant an elephant? So even if you dream, and you know you're dreaming about an elephant, yeah, and it still looks like there's a real elephant there, there's no real elephant there. So I would say it would still be a wrong consciousness. However, certainly not as wrong as when we don't know we're dreaming.
Maybe it becomes a conceptual appearance rather than a non-conceptual one.
No, because the dream is non-conceptual. Yeah. But then it's interesting, what about when you're thinking about something in a dream? What's that? You know, because when you're dreaming, it's not just seeing objects. You can be thinking about something in a dream.
Well, some people direct their actions and direct their speech and talk and change things.
Yeah.
Why don't I go to Bodh Gaya and sit under the seat, on the seat of awakening?
Yeah. But see, you know, they're very strong that what we dream about is not the actual object, okay? But, yeah, I mean, we can certainly dream of thinking about something. Yeah. So what's that one?
Thought, a dream appearance? Isn't the thought just a manifestation of that dream? Yeah.
Direct perception of a thought?
But it's not really a thought, it's just because it's happening within.
So in a dream, is there a difference between you're seeing blue with your dream eyes and thinking about blue? Is it the same object in a dream? Got me. Doesn't seem to be the same object,
Just
does
thinking
it?
about it, they say that's the conceptual appearance.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we can put that on the list for some geshe. The geshe who's going to look at us and say, who would ask a question like that? Okay, you ask Jeffrey, okay? We'll see if he takes that question up. Okay, so that's the seven kind of knowers. What is important in this whole thing to understand is that, for example, when we're trying to realize emptiness, okay, and cut the root of ignorance, we start off where we, as ignorant beings with wrong consciousnesses, that are grasping at inherent existence. Okay? When we start to hear teachings, then from wrong consciousness, we're going to go to doubt that's inclined towards the wrong conclusion. That, well, I think things are inherently existent, but maybe they aren't. You've heard some teaching and it's somewhere there. Then you keep hearing more teachings, you keep thinking about it, then you go to a doubt that's equal. Well, maybe things are inherently existent, maybe they're not. And you keep going with the process of hearing, thinking, then you get to a doubt inclined towards the right conclusion. Yeah, I'm not sure if they're truly existent, but I don't think so. I think they're really empty. Okay? And actually, Aryadeva says even you get that kind of doubt, that's starting to tear samsara asunder, just having that doubt. in one way you can look at it and say, well, that doubt doesn't do you much good because you're still, grasping at the wrong thing. But in another way, it's that doubt is starting to take us in the right direction. And at least we're questioning our wrong view. We're not so stuck in defending our wrong view. Okay. From the doubt inclined to the right conclusion, then we go to a correct assumer. So yeah, things are empty because they're dependent, for example. Yeah. But we don't quite understand what it means that they're dependent. We don't quite understand that because they're dependent, they're empty. It's like we kind of have some idea and it sounds good. So that's a correct assumer. And then I think we really work at that level of correct assumer for quite a long time until we can really get of course, some people can do it quicker than others because of previous life karma, but until we can actually get a true inference, that the self, for example, is empty of true existence because it arises dependently. Yeah, and to really see that the self is a dependent arising, and anything that's a dependent arising has to be empty of true existence, inherent existence. Okay, so
sometimes the direct inference comes first. Sometimes the direct inference comes first.
Before what?
Well, before theoretically getting the right idea and contemplating it. Sometimes there's direct seeing and knowing, and then you might check with the teacher. You might question about that. You might recognize,
yeah.
Right, this is according to...
Yeah, I think if that happens, that would be because in a previous life somebody had the inference. Yeah, because I think without having the inference, just sitting down and directly knowing emptiness, according to our tradition, that doesn't happen.
Often something happens as a trigger to break open the mind.
Right.
Break open the web of fabrication.
Right. Yeah, that can happen, but that you would have to have had some awareness of emptiness in the past. Yeah.
Isn't that an inference based on the power of authority?
Yeah, but here, to realize emptiness, do you use the inference and the power of authority for things that are extremely hidden? Yeah, and emptiness is one that's slightly, hidden. So you initially really get at it by the power of inference. It's not by just making the mind blank and getting rid of all thoughts. Yeah, and that's a big misunderstanding that people have. All I have to do is get rid of all thoughts and then I perceive emptiness. Not necessarily. Yeah. So, because we have to know what emptiness is. That's what I know what emptiness is. It's a negation. You can't point to it and say what it is. But we have to know what is being negated there. Yeah. Then from a correct inference, then when you meditate on that with the union of serenity and insight, then the conceptual appearance of emptiness gets weaker and weaker and weaker until finally there's a direct perceiver of it. And that's a yogic direct perceiver. It's done with the mental consciousness. It's the union of serenity and insight. It's not seeing it with our eyes or with just some kind of ordinary mental consciousness. Yeah. I think people can have all sorts of different experiences that might open the door for them to understand emptiness, but those experiences are not necessarily a direct perceiver of emptiness. Yeah. So people can have, because we all have some kind of unusual experiences where you get some feeling like, wow, things are not the way I thought. But I don't think all those experiences are direct perceivers of emptiness. Yeah. Could be some opening, some loosening of some conception. Yeah.
Excuse me. By perception, do you mean the right cognition of the experience, or do you mean the seeing?
When I'm talking about direct perception, it would be the actual seeing without any kind of conceptual appearance. You know? It would be what you would say at stream entry. The seeing of nirvana at stream entry would be direct perception. Yeah. Of course, just seeing emptiness doesn't dismantle all of our wrong consciousnesses altogether. We have to meditate on it over a period of time and gradually, you know, eliminate the different afflictions and fetters and defilements. And different schools may have different views about this. Yeah. But if you think about it, you know, we've been seeing true existence our whole life. So if we've been perceiving true existence our whole life, how are we going to recognize its absence when we can't even recognize its appearance, how it appears right now? You know, it's like to recognize there's no elephant in this room, you have to know what an elephant would look like if it were in this room. Yeah.
But isn't it like when you clarified the point for the SAFE program? I've listened to it a few times. Previously, the explanation that has been given many times was that you were trying to identify inherent existence, but actually it seems like more like you're trying to use the arguments to convince yourself that it's not possible.
Well, first you have to, in the meditation, I have some kind of idea of if inherent existence did exist, what would it be like? So even though inherent existence doesn't exist, we have to, you know, recognize something about, you know, if it did, what it would be like. And that gets us more in touch with the appearance to our mind, to try and identify, you know, what it is we're grasping at existing that doesn't exist.
And would you say that part is the part where you're identifying the object of negation?
Right, that's identifying the object of negation. Yeah. And then the second step is to say, if things existed inherently like that, if they did exist that way, then they would have to be either truly one in the, like the self, the person would have to be truly one and the same as the aggregates, or truly separate, inherently one and the same or inherently separate.
That would be the consequence of existence in that way.
Yeah, that would be the second point. Yeah, that there's only, that if things were true existent, inherently existent, they would have to exist in one of those two ways. Okay, and then the third and the fourth point are seeing that, well, if the person and the aggregates were identical, then you would have all these problems, and so they can't exist that way. And then the other one is, if the person and the aggregates were completely and totally separate, you would have this whole bunch of other problems.
And then your mind would go to this sense of absence of that.
Right. Right.
Somebody's mind.
Our minds will eventually go that way. Yeah.
So the bhikkhu who was in Spokane this past weekend, the bhikkhu elder Bhante Silavimala, who led the seminar at the Spokane Buddhist Temple this last weekend, I've heard him teach and give instruction in looking at phenomena, and using the example of the two hands and seeing our projection, our fabrication as like one hand, the actuality, or what can be discerned in a bare way, through bare perception, as the other. And normally having the projection like completely, overlaying the other, so you can't distinguish between them.
Right.
Then trying to separate that out and see the space between them. Be able to really see then that projection as a fabrication, as a mental fabrication, and as an object, and being able to see the space, and then more and more to see the other, which is the unfabricated perception. He's taught about that in my presence. I think a couple of occasions, so I'm interested in your thought about that.
Yeah.
That's what
Okay. Yeah. So this example of there's the object and here's our fabrication of it put on top, the inherent existence put on top of the object. And so what we're trying to do is get some space between those two. I think in some way that analogy works, but in another way it makes it sound like there's still something real out there.
You're affirming something.
Yeah, you're still affirming something. Whereas in our tradition, emptiness, and in your tradition too, emptiness is a negation. Nirvana is an absence. It's an absence. It's a negative. It's not, there's nothing getting affirmed at that time. Yeah?
Still, someone without diluted mental fabrications can have a conversation.
Right. That is when we're doing conventional reality. Yeah. Because conventional things exist, but when we're dealing with conventional things, they're on the level of appearances. Yeah. Whereas when we're talking about emptiness, that's talking about the actual mode of existence. So they say only a Buddha can see those two things at the same time. Yeah, that even high-level bodhisattvas, even arhats, when they're in meditative equipoise, they only see emptiness. When they come out, then there's still the false appearance, but there's no grasping at it. For the arhat, yeah. And for the Arya Bodhisattvas too. Yeah. Yeah. So all the things, even the Buddha used the word I. So all of that is just on the conventional level. But when you look and try and find what something really is, yeah, you can't find, all you see is the absence of inherent existence. They say there's nothing that's getting affirmed at that time. Yeah.
Changing the topic. Often I've talked about having doubt, but I'm kind of thinking now that we've studied this, that actually in those moments I'm having wrong consciousnesses. In those moments I don't feel like there's a tug one way or the other. It's just there, So what I was just, that's good to know. But what I was wondering is, does that process still hold? It seems to me what I'm doing is having to refute those. And I guess there's the struggle in between might be the doubt part. But I think where it starts is actually wrong consciousness. So is it still that I'm going to wind my way out of that through these?
Yeah. Yeah, we all start out with wrong consciousnesses, and then you've heard teachings, and so you start to question and say, is that consciousness right or wrong? Oh, well, I've heard enough teachings to know that when I'm angry, that's a wrong consciousness. So, okay, I've kind of forgotten exactly how it's wrong because it feels right. So I have to go back over it again and really look and show myself, remind myself exactly why anger is a wrong consciousness. Yeah? And so then when you do that, then you are pulling yourself out of that wrong consciousness. and into a correct way of seeing things.
And does it kind of, would you say then that you're somewhat using some of these 7, well, you're probably not, to the inference of that, but you're heading your way towards
Yeah, you're definitely going in there, aren't you?
You have the doubt, and then you're...
Yeah. Well, when you have the wrong consciousness and you think it's right, that's when you're really unhappy. My anger's right. This person did this and they did that. And that's the time where we're the most miserable. Yeah. The moment we say, I'm miserable because I'm angry, at that moment some kind of doubt is setting in. That, oh, maybe this isn't a correct consciousness. Yeah. And then you start going into that some more, and yeah, I'm painting this whole picture on this other person that is not there. It's simply not there. Yeah. And so at that point, you're going from doubt into a correct assumer, into a correct kind of consciousness. Okay?
And it's just the power of habit that gets you. You can do that process and stand up, and then you're right back where you started.
And you got to go over it again and again. I mean, that's why they call it practice. It isn't called get it right on the first time and have it right thereafter. It's called practice. There's a reason. Yeah. The reason it's called practice. So I want to check, because I prepared the quiz. Did the quiz get put up? And all of you have copies of the quiz?
They were sent copies electronically, and I asked, would you like a hard copy or just the electronic copy?
Did you get the digital?
Yeah, everybody got the email.
Okay.
Printed mine out.
Okay,
Yes, I sent it out.
good.
We'll
Okay.
take this offline.
Okay. Good, okay.
And
So then,
next week.
yeah,
Okay.
unless I change my mind. Okay.
So on page, we're going to start on page 14 and then go to page 30.
Oh, I should actually just start reading from the beginning of the text a little bit, just in case this is actually the last one.
We have a few paragraphs.
Oh yeah, we do, but I was thinking of not doing those. Having bowed down to the glorious Losangdrapa, emanation of Manjughosha, treasury of wisdom, I extend this presentation of mind and awareness, composite of all the important points, in order to increase the clarity of knowledge of those with low intelligence. So he stated his reason, and do you think he fulfilled his reason for writing the text? Did you get some clarity of knowledge about these points?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah. So then the purpose was fulfilled.
And I wonder if low intelligence, if intelligence isn't buddhi, and low doesn't mean that it's rising.
Say that.
Low doesn't mean that it's rising. That is, whose buddhi is rising.
Okay. I think it means when they talk about, because also in the Pali tradition they talk about low faculty or dull faculty disciples and high faculty disciples. So I think it's referring to that. Yeah. But of course, if you're dull, then the only place to go is up. So there's hope for us.
I just thought it was a nice way to see it.